All right, we're live on Substack. And when we're on all platforms, I will add this one. But I am using this one mostly for blogging and doing the, I guess, citations for the claims that we make. You'll find the receipts for what we talk about on this blog. And one of the things that I've been talking about, and I noticed this first with Robert De Niro, about the time that about a year after I started using the term concurrent programming, I started to notice, and actually I saw this first with Joaquin Phoenix, and even before that with Ed Norton, where I've noticed where the actors will portray a certain character, and then it seems like that character adds gravitas to their political opinions, and it aligns with it. So there's a few ways that they do this. With De Niro and Alec Baldwin, for example, very Trump deranged, they're very anti-Trump, but the way they portray Trump is in an unflattering way. Like De Niro doesn't specifically play Trump, but he plays Senator McLaughlin, the one who's given the anti-immigrant speech when he's shot at. Well, that's not exactly a positive portrayal of him. Or Biff Tannen. Biff Tannen's based on Trump. You wouldn't call that a positive thing. Or the building owner in Gremlins 2, I think his name's Crump, the real estate guy. It's always unflattering. My point of it is, it's noteworthy that the actors who portray him are usually against him in public. And what I'm calling into question here is the authenticity of their public opinions. Does Robert De Niro really have these opinions? Does Mark Ruffalo and all these others, do they actually feel this way? Or are they still on script? Because if they're serving the role of propagandists, then ultimately it's about the messaging that they deliver. And their message isn't merely restricted to the subtexts of the characters that they portray, but their usefulness also extends to whatever they say in public. And what I'm suggesting here is that their opinions are, yeah, it's orthodox, leftist, what you would expect, but I think it's more calculated, especially with the messaging. And this is really cemented with Mark Ruffalo, who overlaps with this in many different ways with the Minneapolis thing. But the Be Good pin that he popularized was one of the more overt references to the movie, which tells the story of the anti-ICE, anti-Trump movement. So I'm looking at this as a pattern, and I was talking about how it's highly significant that this particular actress plays the witch, with Trump as the wizard, having a black female who is opposing Trump is actually fitting a wider pattern. And it's really about demographics. Identity politics are really built into this. It's not insignificant that Renee Good was married or dating a woman. Like, this is all consistent with what the messaging in Wicked is about, for good. It's about tolerance. It's about this fascist who's getting rid of the talking animals and the munchkins, who controls the propaganda and admits that history is fake. I mean, there's quite a lot there, but what I'm saying is it's not surprising that the movie star, Ariana Grande, is now out calling for a national day of protests tomorrow. And I pointed this out. I said, the first part of it I noted was Antifa coded. It was all about Antifa, basically. And the second part is Antifa versus ICE. So again, if you haven't seen Wicked Part 1 and 2, there's a political subtext. It's not difficult to unpack. And I would suggest, too, that its messaging is deliberately targeting those who are sympathetic to the immigrants. It puts Trump in a bad light, as all these various representations of him do. But now, Ariana Grande, using her platform, I mean, why are people even listening to her? Well, because she's a popular actress, because she's on the big screens. So she has a big platform. She has the ability to affect change. And in the movie, the song For Good, the song is about how it again references Renee Good. In the movie, the Wicked Witch's lyrics in that song suggest that she's limited. She doesn't have the power or the position or the privilege to make any big changes. Whereas Glenda, the Good Witch, is basically like the Queen of Oz. And she's materialistic, she's shallow, narcissistic. So she has to become selfless and stop being self centered and essentially go against her privilege in order to save the animals and munchkins and oppose the wizard and take back Oz. And so that's what happens. It's about renouncing one's privilege. That's one of the subtexts to it, and that's why those very specific martyrs were chosen. It's all about their demographics, their race, their age. It's all calculated. Because these psyops are target marketed just as much as movies are. And I'm saying is that the target market is hit with psyops that pertain to the movies they've also been targeted with. And they've really got this down to it's a hard science. It's an art. I mean, this is propaganda. It's how we need to look at it. So Ariana Grande calling out for nationwide protests tomorrow is very consistent with her movie role. And the more I think about it, the more it makes sense that part one ends with the EMP in the Emerald City. And I've come up with some interesting connections since we've been talking about the upcoming Super Bowl, Levi's Stadium, Eliphas Levy and the Flying Elvis, that whole thing. It sounds crazy from the outside, I get it. But there is something there. Because the witch shuts down the Emerald City at the end of part one. And that's before she begins doing these anti-ICE protests. In other words, breaking up the enslavement of the animals. And one point I haven't seen any critics really hit on yet is the fact that he picks up a brick and he knocks it against his face a few times to show that it's just like spongy, fake. So the system is fake, history's fake, he has no magic, and he's being denounced. And when I said pattern, the movie Civil War, which is relevant right now, is essentially about Trump. And they have a very particular executioner in mind when they finally have him on the ground. They bring in a black female soldier. So again, we're talking about left versus right and what represents what would be the paragon of the far right is from the view of the left. Rich, corrupt politician, fascist, racist, whatever. They have this like archetype or this characterization that's going to embody what is on the far right. And so Trump is very much in their view representative of everything that's wrong with the right. And they put this into this Oz character. Everything being phony, everything being propaganda, and his followers being too brainwashed to care about the truth. But on her end, the Wicked Witch is marginalized. She stands out from everyone, obviously, 'cause she's green. And she's the only one who isn't so plugged into the system that she's willing to look away when the animals begin getting kidnapped. So she's got a functioning conscience and she's willing to oppose the system. And the characters that do join her, like the prince, I think his name is Fiero, he's the one who actually joins her, again, renouncing his privilege. And so you have this character who makes the choice to oppose the wizard and he gets crucified. I mean, you see him tied to a post. He's the one who becomes the scarecrow. So again, the theme here is sacrifice for the greater good. But yeah, I just thought it's worth mentioning now that Ariana Grande is calling for these protests tomorrow. And that's consistent with her movie role. And then Giancarlo Esposito, the actor from Breaking Bad, the Chicken Man. So he comes out and he calls for a revolution, even suggesting that it might require millions of people dying in DC. I mean, he's calling for a bloody revolution. Now, what's interesting about this particular actor, and if you're on my blog here, search the Giancarlo Esposito Metascript, because he represents in predictive programming this character in multiple roles, specifically in Megalopolis, but also in The Boys and also in Captain America Brave New World, where the same actor opposes the Trump character. And these are all movies with assassination attempts. These are all movies that correlated with Butler, chronologically released at the same time. So what I'm pointing out here is that not only do we have a consistent Trump appearing in various movies, like he's the Homelander in The Boys. You can read reviews. It's based on Trump. But his antagonist is Edgar, the CEO of Vought, who's played by that actor who called for a revolution against Trump. In Megalopolis, Caesar Catalina, Trump, gets a head wound, survives. His opposition is the mayor, played by the same actor. Same pattern. And then you have the president in Captain America, played by Harrison Ford, shot at while at the podium in a trailer released the day before Butler. And his opposition is Sidewinder, played by, guess who? Giancarlo Esposito, same actor. So what's deeper here is that not only is it the same actor representing the antagonist to the Trump character, but I would posit that he represents Barack Obama in 1776, 1619 versus Trump, 1776. So far left, far right, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, 1619, 1776. These are the two visions of America that are colliding. And there's what they're representing in the movies is this contention between the two that I think started with the birther movement, but has not really even stopped. Obama has still been a critic, but my point is it's what each of these two individuals represent to the respective sides and how they're portrayed in the movies and how there's this overlap between real and fake, which we're always observing and commenting on. So now he's calling for a revolution as essentially what I would consider to be like an Obama proxy. It's coming from that side, obviously. So you're seeing now that in the movies, he's anti-Trump. He's on that side. He's against the Trump character, but in real life, look where he's positioned politically. There's this consistent characterization on and off the screen. And if you watch these various movies, you'll see what I mean. There's a few others I've listed there, and this goes back actually long. It goes back to Do the Right Thing, Spike Lee. And Spike Lee is very significant in this conversation when we talk about these various psyops, like specifically the George Floyd thing, which I would argue Spike Lee probably has a role as a meta scripter in the big picture. And I had mentioned before, I think this was last night, that they did remove Barack Obama's portrait from one end of the White House and they put an image of Trump with his raised fist where that was. So that's communicating something behind the scenes, because it's the Obama character in these movies who sets up the assassination attempts. The mayor even said to Caesar Catalina, "See you in 3 days." Like he's the one who orchestrated it. If you haven't seen Megalopolis, it's Make Rome Great Again. Megalon, it's Magalon. It's 100% Trump. Although the main character Adam Driver doesn't look like Trump, they have, I think, John Vought, is that his name? Conservative type in there, who provides the imagery. It's actually intriguing what they've done with that movie. We're talking about Francis Ford Coppola, who blended footage from 9/11 2001 into this movie. And the movie was meant to be released before that, but he delayed it by 20 plus years because he said after 9/11, it doesn't make sense to make a movie about New York getting hit with an object and essentially looking like a 9/11. But that movie is about time control and history control in particular. It's a big reveal. I think some of these movies are big reveals to the insiders. And in many ways, we are insiders to how this thing operates. And so sometimes the messages aren't lost on us. There's a lot more we could go into here, but the main thing I wanted to bring up is that we have two big actors who are opining about the current situation on the world stage in ways that reflect the characters that they played, who symbolically acted out the same struggles. So Glenda the Good Witch opposing the Wizard of Oz, Ariana Grande opposing Donald Trump. You see, there's a direct parallel. So when we talk about the programming, concurrent or predictive, it's not just about the numbers or the specific phrases that just happen to align in a very curious way, but it's the entire theme. There are themes being conveyed. There are relationships being established. Who's good? Who's bad? Nobody would say the Wizard of Oz is the good guy in that movie. And I'm still waiting for some critics to write about how essentially it's an anti-ice movie. With these, oh, it's eerie coincidence. It's life imitates art. Art imitates life. There's some kind of relationship between the artists and directors and conveying the zeitgeist to us, holding a mirror to society. It's like, nope, that's not quite it. The movies are propaganda conduits sending us messages, programming us. And the movie screen is the Overton window. And they're widening it right now to allow for the aliens to fit through. So that's something to look forward to. And speaking of aliens, I just retweeted something. Actually, I posted it in Discord. It's a link to an article about Men in Black and the 9/11 predictive programming in Men in Black. And there is this scene where this Kraken like alien comes out and it's holding this person by his ankles right in front of the Twin Towers in the exact position of the falling man. And the photographer who photographed the falling man was there 33 years prior when RFK was falling to his death. The photographer who shot that photo also got the falling man on 9/11. In fact, we got to do some of these photographers in our bigger breakdown because we talk about meta scripters, the writers, the directors, the actors. But what about the photographers in these various events and the reporters? You can kind of look, who's behind the scenes and how far. Who knows what's really going on? You can actually tell if you examine their work and remove plausible deniability when applicable. But there are certain, like the same photographer who photographed the fight, fight, fight photo is the one who photographed the shoe being thrown at George Bush, dodging the shoe. The same photographer, again, who photographs RFK falling to his death, photographs the 9/11 falling man. The photographer who photographed George W. Bush having the Secret Service whisper into his ear that America was under attack on 9/11 is the same guy who photographed the bullet whizzing by Trump's ear in Butler. I mean, those are shots of a lifetime for a photographer, iconic. And these are the types who I think are insiders. Like, hey, we're making history. You're composing shots that will go down in history. This is your legacy. This will last 1,000 years. Like, I think it's a big ego boost for some of these propagandists to have their art become part of our fabricated history. And Butler, Pennsylvania was quite a propaganda victory. It's worth studying because I would argue that the photography itself is evidence of hoaxery. The fight, fight, fight photo was framed to mirror Braveheart. Trump's Truth Social avatar had the Braveheart face paint with 9/11 encoded into it. Two stripes. You had the blue over his eye making a 9 stars in it. The 9/11 encoded into his face also aligns with the 45, 47 on his hat, which gives you a 9/11. But everything about it was perfectly staged. And then when he shows up again 84 days later, the New York Post had a picture of him with his fist raised and it said Braveheart. I was like, that's interesting. Especially when you consider the significance of Mel Gibson, who's kind of part of this inner circle. Mel Gibson is undeniably part of it. He's very close to the Q movement. He's Q adjacent. He's right there connected with Jim Caviezel, who is openly Q pusher, who spent time with Trump. They watched his movie Sound of Freedom together at Bedminster. There's a video of them watching the movie. But Mel Gibson, of course, Braveheart. Actually, I would even suggest, if I had to guess, what has Mel Gibson contributed to this other than, well, first of all, in Patriot, there's an opening scene, and I'm pretty sure I have this on my blog. Mel Gibson in the Patriot, he's sitting on a rocking chair that he made, and he's weighing the rocket chair. He's like 9 pounds, 11 ounces. That's perfect. And he sits on it, and everyone in the room stares at him apprehensively, like they're expecting something terrible to happen. The camera looks at the back of the chair. You see the two legs, and then the chair crashes while everybody's watching. So 9 pounds, 11 ounces, sits on the rocking chair. Everyone's looking, and then they collapse. The next scene, they're invaded. He goes to war. His sons go to war. So 9/11, two things collapse. The war, Patriot. And this came out right before the Patriot. I would even suggest that Mel Gibson may have had a hand in directing the Charlie Kirk squibbing. I mean, freedom was the words that he's screaming in the end of Braveheart when he's disemboweled and crucified. And then you have freedom on the white shirt worn by Charlie Kirk, who never wore white shirts before then. And I think I see his signature in January 6th. The big mob fighting with the flagpoles waving all dramatically. That whole fake thing. Yeah, the director of Braveheart was probably behind that. And I totally credit him with Butler. Not totally, but I think he's part of the art direction. Because these psyops are based on scripts. These are movie productions. And there's scheduled movies to be produced in our news that will be accepted as real into the future. Everything we're experiencing now is already scripted. It's predetermined. But they still need the art direction, the artists, the writers, the actors. They still need the talent to make these things happen. And if you go back to John Frankenheimer, Manchurian Candidate, the movie that brought about the idea of the mind-controlled assassin, he was friendly with JFK, filmed one of his movies in the White House, and then he drove RFK to the Ambassador Hotel to get killed by a mind-controlled assassin. I mean, that's pretty close. There is this ongoing close relationship between entertainment and the major fake events that has been largely ignored or misunderstood for a long time. The mainstreamers ignore it. They hear the word coincidence and it stops them from thinking. It's like a spell. Coincidence. They immediately ignore anything that comes after. That's got to be mind control. Oh, it's just a coincidence. That's not really an answer because we're not denying it's a coincidence. We're saying it's a coincidence that is a result of intentionality. But again, the general understanding of the relationship between entertainment and fake events for a long time has been it's coincidence or we live in a simulation. It wasn't until this think tank honed in on it, and as a result of our empirical research, we arrived at the right solution, which is intentionality. Not by the universe, not by the devil, not by God, not by a simulation entity, but no, this is propaganda in the movies, in the entertainment, synchronized to go along with the news. And you don't need to predict the future in order for them to do this. Like they're not like psychic. Like, oh, we know this event's going to happen at this time. They're not magically manifesting it. No, these events are scheduled. Obviously, it's not all news, but it's the significant historic events that are being manufactured. So there's a whole list of historic events that are going to happen that are going to be completely synthetic. It's like lies, just about lies. It's really not complicated. Propaganda is not new. It's just far more sophisticated than it's ever been before. And so when you see these actors walking off the movie screen and telling us what to do, that's the government. That's government propaganda. And these aren't real people. I mean, what you're seeing is a breathing person, a living, breathing person. They're alive. However, what you're actually viewing on the screen is a persona and a propaganda outlet. I mean, they may actually agree with the propaganda. That's really immaterial because what they're doing is they're serving as vectors. Last night we were talking about the significance of the name Nick. and the code that means victory for the people. So we're talking about the painting of the zeitgeist, the big background, the spirit of the age. We've got this growing disdain for the wizard. The munchkins and the animals are organizing. The Wicked Witch, again, Antifa, the left. And the code is what's most fascinating to me. But last night we were talking about Nick and how significant that name has come up. Nick Maduro's Nike, Nicolette Street, Renee Nicole, and how it's been even in the lyrics of that new song by Bruce Springsteen. And I listened to it. So if you don't want to listen to it, I did. But in the opening lyrics, he mentions the name Nicolette. So that's like this theme, victory for the people. Well, the people, obviously represent the left. It's kind of that word has a connotation, but that name, Nick, was propagating before the Antifa started mobilizing as they have been. So too with the color green, which we picked up on sometime before, but it's really consolidated lately. And now we were already talking about the significance of green and the green skinned witch going against Oz. We were already discussing all of this. And then we find out Green Day, who's anti-ICE, anti-Trump, is opening up for the Super Bowl. And that's not the only example of it, but we're just pointing out how certain sentiments are associated with the left and the right, the split. Like, I think it's highly significant that in Captain America, Harrison Ford, who again gets shot at the podium, Harrison Ford, who actually has a 7/13 birthday, which is the day Trump was shot at, Julius Caesar's birthday. And Trump did play Julius Caesar in the park, or rather, Julius Caesar was portrayed as Trump, who was getting stabbed when Lauren Loomer jumped on the stage to interrupt it. But in that movie, Harrison Ford becomes the Red Hulk. And I was thinking about this. Red Hulk, Hulk Hogan being very vocal after Trump was shot at, but the Red Hulk and then the Green Hulk is Mark Ruffalo, which kind of makes sense because Ruffalo, again, firmly positioned on the left. And speaking of the color green, like, okay, so I was actually seeing some, man, this is insane how the madness has the Antifa arming up with ghost guns. And then Luigi gets a ghost gun, like the character in the movie who kills the CEO, who floods the internet with Nazis. Well, Luigi, in a video game, Luigi's mansion at the time has a ghost gun. So we're talking about this ghost gun thing. And the Luigi color code, the green beret going after Trump and Elon. Anyway, I'm looking at the news today, and on Twitter, I'm seeing a bunch of Antifas are making 3D printed guns and showing people how to do it. I've seen a number of these videos coming up, and I'm like, that's interesting. Because in the movie, the line was, it's like Antifa with guns on meth, describing this new uprising. Which, again, the madness has foreshadowed quite a lot of what's happening right now. But anyway, someone tried to free Luigi today. They broke into, not, they didn't break in, they sneaked into the prison, representing themselves as an FBI agent, and they had a pizza cutter that they were going to try to use to get him free. Now, I don't know what the significance of the pizza cutter is. I mean, we have Mario's Pizza here, but I don't think it's that Mario. I haven't seen. We do have a Luigi's, I think, but again, it's not that Luigi. Are the Super Mario Brothers associated with pizza? I don't know. By the way, I was looking up Challenger because today's the anniversary of the, or yes, was it? No, today's the anniversary of the Challenger explosion. Or was that yesterday? So the Challenger explosion was 40 years ago. And then a couple days ago, we had that plane crash called the Challenger. So when I looked up Challenger, I see a headline that said anti-ice limiter responsible for Challenger crash. And I was like, what does that refer to? The Challenger or the airplane Challenger? Well, it's the airplane. But I thought it was interesting that something, quote, anti-ice was responsible for the Challenger going down. Because, anti-ice, You can kind of see what that could reference. But then what's the Challenger? Well, we've done a deeper breakdown of the Challenger, analyzing the significance of it crashing at 73 seconds and how this Challenger may actually relate in many ways to the Destroyer, the Exterminator, Apollyon, Abaddon, Revelation 9/11. So there's this 9/11 code that ties in the idea of the weapon from the abyss, the nuclear submarine. There's this kind of uh, way it's being characterized. We've talked about the significance of the Kraken, for example, or Godzilla, a metaphor for the nuke. The Revelation 9/11 references of Abaddon, the angel of the abyss. And then I've also seen the Destroyer. And then I think Apollyon could mean the Exterminator, which I think Terminator also is pertinent here. Same concept. But I think Challenger would also fit in this as well, because when James Cameron went down to the wreckage of the Titanic on 9/11, his craft was called the Deep Sea Challenger. So you have Challenger overlooking the wreckage. In Revelation 9/11, you have the Abaddon overlooking the abyss. So if you look at it from that perspective, the Challenger looking over the devastation, well, the devastation of the Titanic would also correlate with the devastation of Ground Zero. And so in that regard, I think Challenger fits right in as a synonym for destroyer, for this whole litany of adjectives describing whatever it is that takes down the towers, takes down the Tower of Babel, takes down America. I think it's all just code. So anyway, I'm just trying to determine, well, what could this possibly mean? A plane by the name of Challenger going down on the 40th anniversary of the Challenger explosion. And it was runway 33. And the last thing they heard was, "Let there be light." And I remembered, wait, last year on January 29th, you had the AA flight hitting the Black Hawk, runway 33. That's kind of strange. So, what is it with this week of January and airborne disasters, tragedies, immolations? Seems a bit ritualistic, if you ask me. One more thing. I mentioned John Frankenheimer and his role in the Kennedy's assassinations. He also directed Black Sunday, which has a blimp at a stadium during a football game, and it's going to do a terror attack. And Green Day is opening up at the Super Bowl. And interestingly, their album cover has a mushroom cloud and a blimp in the background that says "Bad Year," as opposed to "Good Year." And we all know the significance of good right now. So I'm thinking, could that be something somewhat predictive? And I still haven't quite figured out what Bad Bunny's significance is in all of this. Someone suggested it relates to Labubu, but it's certainly not apolitical. And the significance of an anti-ICE celebrity performing at this event only highlights the level of pre-programming, because the ICE protest started after the choice was already made. I mean, I'm just looking at these as pieces being put onto the game board. But the consistency has been the idea of the green representing opposing the fascists. And I pointed out last night that on 4/19, 2024, Trump was in court and Maxwell Rello sets himself on fire outside. And that specifically connects to Waco, to McVeigh, but also it ties in to the Space Needle, which became a historic monument on 4/19, 1999. But in his manifesto, he pointed out that Trump and Hillary, Biden and Trump, that they're same team. So we have consistently been looking at this as, when they do this big disruption, when the Kraken hits Seattle, however it plays out, it's always seemed to be presumed that it's going to come from the right. That seemed to be the indication, especially with the Waco connections. But Maxwell Rello, who did wear a "Eat the Rich" shirt, he was kind of not really left or right. He was definitely believing in this. I mean, it's kind of like ambiguous in a way, but he was suggesting that no, it's actually about the oligarchs, a small group, and the people need victory over the small group. So it kind of expands the potential as far as who would be benefiting from it, key bono. But one thing for sure, I think here is that the stage has been set with this whole theme of victory of the people and the green movement or the green, um, this class warfare framework, the rich, what was it no more, no kings? This no kings thing also ties into this. And this is all recent history, recent news, but now recent history. No kings protests while the crown jewels are stolen from the Louvre. Meanwhile, Lupin on Netflix has a show. Netflix has a show called Lupin, where the characters are stealing from the Louvre the necklace of Marie Antoinette, who lost her head during a No Kings protest. Meanwhile, the Drudge Report has Donald Trump as Marie Antoinette as the main picture. So you read between the lines, or you don't even have to. It's almost just ham-fisted these days. It's just out there. The story, well, history is a collection of stories, and the stories are being promulgated from every possible platform and angle. I listened to Jimmy Kimmel talking about Alex Preddy, and he's like, watch it from every angle. I'm like, is it even comedy anymore, or is it just advocacy? And I don't like to give them the moral high ground because, like, yeah, just because you feel outraged by this doesn't mean you're necessarily a good person. That's like a normal reaction to have to somebody being killed. But just because I'm not crying over these events doesn't mean that I don't have a conscience or don't care or that I'm apathetic. Quite the opposite. It's just that I'm detached enough to not overreact. And I would say if you don't know that the event is more than just propaganda, any reaction is an overreaction. Like, what do you know that we don't? What makes you so quick to assume that this one is real? And if you look at past precedent, when have they ever been forthright? When have they ever promulgated something from every front, including every popular actor and musician? I mean, think about it. You got Bruce Springsteen, Giancarlo Esposito, Ariana Grande, Mark Ruffalo. Everywhere we go, you have these propaganda props, these walking, talking mind viruses who are ensuring that we get the right messaging. It's an inescapable echo chamber. All right, well, we are going to be live probably closer to 10 on the main channel. I was just getting my notes down and I figured I would try this again because what I like about Substack is it'll take these videos, and this one's not even that long, and it'll splice it up into shorts and auto post them to one of my YouTube channels. So this is kind of a recruitment tool. So people who aren't listening to 2 or 3 hour long live streams might hear a shorter video and agree, and then go to ips.monster and find us in the live chats. And it could be as early as tomorrow or maybe a week after, but very soon I'll be on the lookout for an office space and a replacement computer so we can get back into the 800 number and start taking calls and then expand onto more platforms. And when I'm at that point, what I probably will do is I'll do this and I'll leave this on and then I'll start up the main live stream. So what this will do is it will um, archive separately, but it's the same live stream. Or I might be able to add it with the broadcasting software. I'll figure it out when the time comes. One more thing about the actor Esposito from Breaking Bad calling for a revolution. So I read something about him in his bio that he had contemplated self-destruction. He was working out some way to get insurance for his family. So he's at this really low point. And then the show Breaking Bad gives him a big break. And now he's a big star. And I thought that's kind of interesting because that mirrors Walter White in some way. these characters who reach the end, they're willing to do something drastic, and they reinvent themselves. And in Walter White's case, it was a breaking point, and then he reinvents himself as Heisenberg. If you haven't seen the series, it's pretty much a documentary of Albuquerque. What I like about it is a lot of it. I mean, it's kind of slow at some points, but it does have this idea built into it of alchemy, the transformation of the character into someone else as a result of circumstances, and this transformation, alchemy, is also kind of mirrored in the chemistry that he's involved in. And in the first episode, when he and the drug maker get together, he says, "This is a science," and the drug dealer says, "No, it's an art." And I think that's kind of a description of alchemy. This idea of, in fact, the alchemy card in the one of the tarot decks has actually been retitled Art. And I think it also relates to the black wide brimmed hat that Heisenberg puts on towards the end. Very Saturnian, which kind of looks like the hat that Oppenheimer wears. And if you haven't seen Oppenheimer, this Christopher Nolan film, it goes along with Jonathan Nolan and Fallout. Lots of 33 code, are built into these movies. But it was filmed on an IMAX film, which was 11 miles long and weighed 600 pounds. 11.6. In the movie, he wears a badge that says K6, 11.6. And what I was picking up on is 11.6, which is an upside down 9/11, has also like 6/11 and 11.6 have been consistently coordinated with this domestic terror 9/11ing nuke scenario. Just another one of these patterns. It was even evident in Batman, where it was in 2022. It comes out on March 4th. The day it comes out, March 4th, 2022, Joker, Sarnath, the Boston bomber, has his death penalty reinstated. But in the movie, the Riddler, whose weapon is a Tucker, which I don't think is insignificant because Tucker Carlson at the time was being viewed as this promulgator of dangerous ideas and radicalizing people. This is before he was just talking about aliens in his bed scratching him. But at that point, he was more like white genocide, which is about illegal aliens taking over. But in that Batman movie, the Riddler gets his online activists to detonate some explosives at these dams and flood the elections. And at that time, the midterm slogan for the GOP was flood the polls. I was like, that's interesting. Flood the polls. The actual election day gets flooded. So Gotham's underwater at the end of the movie. And Batman's like, it's Wednesday, November the 6th. Gotham's underwater. So 11.6, Gotham underwater as a result of this. So would the Riddler be considered right wing, left wing, like the Joker is decidedly on the left? And the Riddler's kind of in the, I don't know, I'll have to look at this closer, but I kind of got the idea that he's more like chaotic and possibly like Maxwell Rello. And there's also some overlap between the end of that Batman movie and the aftermath is where the Penguin takes place. So if you haven't seen Penguin with Colin Farrell, I didn't know that was Colin Farrell until after the season was over. Like, I was totally fooled. I thought that was just some very talented guy with a very interesting face, very much a character actor. But no, it's all fake. But it does have a pretty significant terror attack underground. Just maybe there's something in it I haven't seen. But it crossed my mind it might be relevant given that penguins were force memed into the mass consciousness over the last week. I painted several versions of the nihilist penguin, and they all sold. I think I have one more I might list tonight. In fact, I have to list a lot of artwork because my eBay store is actually doing well. and I sold out of inventory, but I have quite a lot to list. So I'm going to list a bunch of artwork, and then we're going to go live on the main channel and review the recent happenings. But I'm just kind of honing in on a couple of points here. One of them being concerted messaging, and the other one being these walking, talking propaganda vectors, these walking mind viruses, the Ariana Grandes, the Gene Carlos, the Mark Ruffalos. Just kind of, I guess what it emphasizes here is that these actors are actors on the stage and off the stage. Their opinions are likely fed to them. I don't think we're dealing with a lot of authentic people out there. I could be wrong. Maybe the mass media and mainstream entertainment is full of authentic, real people, but I highly doubt it. All right, thanks for listening. We'll be live in a couple of hours. I'll send out notifications. Just testing out the system. I look forward to getting back into an office space, having a 24/7 live stream because I don't get tired. The only reason we don't have all of our um, computers up and running, I just don't have the space yet, but that's coming very soon. And when it does, everything will accelerate, and I'll get into the business of promoting the book. And I've been watching some videos by this channel who does these very interesting infographics. And I'm thinking about taking an example from this person and printing out some graphics that can then be downloaded as PDFs. I've already started this process, but I want to do this more as we build our encyclopedia of hoaxes for the last 100 years and delineate between the timeline of fake events that has been superimposed over the real world. Because until you separate the two, you can't really step outside of their program. And I see a lot of people still clinging to various aspects of the fake timeline, and they're going to stand out very soon because their positions are untenable and ridiculous. But we'll get to that. All right, we'll see you in the Discord. Go to ips.monster if you don't have the link.